I don't ever remember a time where anyone in my life actually talked to me specifically about ideas of consent. I'm a little ashamed to say that, but it's honest. I don't remember a kid having anyone do it as a teenager, even as an adult. Up until I started to engage in feminism was the first time I even started to think really honestly and specifically about ideas of consent. I think part of that is because I was struggling with my own identity, my own sexuality, and so the idea of even having sex with someone was a little foreign to me. I was afraid of the idea of sex and being intimate and naked way with someone. So I think that over time I started to just think that if I am going to have sex with anyone, I, as the individual, have to be very comfortable with myself before I would even allow someone to be with me in intimate ways. I don't think that we as men talk a lot about ideas of safety in sex, but I think for your first couple of experiences when it comes to having sex, whether it's with someone of the same sex or opposite sex, you want to feel safe that you're not going to be shamed during sex or after sex. So there was a part of me that when I decided to first have an intimate relationship with a woman, I needed to get to know her in such a way where I did feel that my quote-unquote performance would not be shamed because I was never taught about intimacy. I was never taught about sex. I was never taught about anything that has to do with sex. I learned a lot of it via television, via porn. So I think that those are some of the worst ways to learn about sex. Like for me specifically, during my first intimate contact, it was, did I feel safe enough to be naked in front of that other person? Did I feel comfortable enough with my own body? I hated the fact that I was gay more than anything else. I mean, I could not reconcile the fact that I was an athlete, that I was a man, because I was taught so long and so early and with so much intentionality that being gay was the worst thing that you can be. And it was also something that Black people didn't engage in. Like, we didn't engage in homosexuality. So it took me so many years to, one, find people who allowed me to show up in the world as myself, right? To be able to say, hey, like, I'm a Black man, I'm a former athlete, and I'm attracted to other men. Like, to find spaces where people allowed me to do that was so important. Secondly, I actually had to recreate family structures. I never believed that my family, that my mother specifically, would ever embrace me, would love me, would provide me with the same forms of intimacy that she did when I was a child as an adult if I told her that I was gay. So I just really started to create new family structures because I was so afraid that when I did tell my parents that immediately I would be shunned. And then I started dating someone who gave me strength, who gave me courage to say that, hey, like, am I going to continually allow my mother to live my life, or am I going to start to recreate my own story for myself and start to live for myself? And then it was starting to have a practice of self-love, whether it was through meditation or through reading about what it meant to be a Black man. Like, there were so many things that I had to do first in order for me to take off this mask, in order to allow people to see my real self before I could even say the words out loud that I was gay. That just took so many other steps. And I wish that someone had have taught me so much younger how to love myself. I say this often, that we're taught to love ourselves, but people never actually give you real tangible examples of what that looks like in your everyday life.
With the journey that you've walked on now, when you look back at your 14, 15-year-old self, what would you tell him about consent?
I would tell him that he's got to consent to love himself. I think that oftentimes we think of consent as something that we do for others, but I firmly believe that the first part of consent is that you have to do it for yourself. You have to give yourself the consent to love yourself, which will create the conditions for you to allow others to love you, for you to love others. And if I could do it all over again, there's not much that I would change, but the one thing that I would do first is I would give myself consent to love myself without the fear of what someone else will think about it. And I often sit and think about the journey that I've been on, and the entire journey has always been towards getting to the space where I loved myself without worrying about the cost to others. I think that we can think about self-love as something that is egotistical, but self-love, I think, is the highest form of consent.